I never thought a story like mine would matter to anyone. Honestly, if you had asked me a year ago what the most surprising thing in my life was, I would have probably said something simple, like the day Kelly lost her first tooth and tried to convince me the tooth fairy should pay double because she was extra brave. But life has this strange habit of laughing at my expectations and throwing me into situations that feel nothing like the world I thought I belonged to. And it all started on a rainy Thursday morning. I remember standing in my tiny kitchen, staring at a burnt piece of toast while Kelly ran around trying to find her shoes. She always loses just one. Never a pair. Always a single shoe, as if the universe wanted to test my patience every morning. I was exhausted, already late for my shift, already calculating how long it would take to drop her off at school without getting a warning from my supervisor again. But even in that panic, I caught myself thinking, at least things are stable. At least nothing insane ever happens to us. I didn't know it yet, but that thought aged like milk. That day was the first time I saw her. Eliza Austin. Not that I knew her name at the time. To me, she was just a woman in an expensive black suit, heels that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and the kind of calm expression that rich people seem to be born with. Kelly and I had rushed into the elevator of the Austin Corp building, yeah, the same building half the city talks about, because I had a maintenance job scheduled for the 27th floor. The doors were closing, and we managed to slip in at the last second, soaking wet from the rain. I shook the water from my jacket, embarrassed, trying not to let any drops hit the woman standing at the back of the elevator. She didn't say a word. She just glanced briefly at me, then at Kelly, then at the puddle forming under our shoes. That look alone made me want to apologize for existing. Kelly, being Kelly, didn't feel any of that tension. She just smiled at the stranger and waved. "Hi." The woman blinked slowly. "Hello." Her voice was controlled in a way I can't even describe. Like someone who spent her whole life making sure emotions never spilled out of place. Kelly leaned closer to me and whispered loudly, "Daddy, she smells like those fancy soaps at the hotel we went to once." I almost died. "Kelly," I muttered through my teeth, inside voice. The woman actually raised an eyebrow, and for a moment I thought she might smile, but she didn't. Instead, she returned to staring at her phone. The elevator hummed awkwardly as we ascended floor by floor. That should have been it, just a tiny, forgettable moment in a long week. But destiny, or coincidence, or whatever you want to call it, wasn't done with me. When the elevator reached the 27th floor, I noticed her finger hovering over the exact same button. She stepped out too, and that was the moment something switched in my head. Because why on earth would someone like her be going to a maintenance floor? That level was all electrical rooms, maintenance closets, and mechanical systems. Definitely not a place for expensive heels. I didn't say anything, of course. I just held Kelly's hand and walked ahead. When I arrived at the office where I was supposed to check the building's security system wires, I found my supervisor sweating bullets, talking to two assistants dressed like they were escorting royalty. And then I saw her again. Standing by the window, looking out over the city like she owned all of it, which, as I later learned, she pretty much did. My supervisor spotted me and waved frantically. "Jones. What took you so long? We have a situation." I glanced at Kelly, then back at him. "I got here as fast as I." "Never mind," he snapped quietly. "Just be respectful." "Very respectful." He stepped aside, revealing the woman from the elevator. She turned, and the whole room seemed to get colder. Her eyes locked on me with this sharp, assessing look, like I was a variable she was trying to solve. "Is this the technician?" she asked without bothering to hide her irritation. "Yes, Ms. Austin," one of the assistants said. "Ms. Austin." I felt my stomach drop. This wasn't just a random office worker. This was her, the CEO. The woman whose decisions shaped thousands of people's lives. The type of person whose name shows up in headlines and business magazines. And I had just introduced myself by dripping rainwater onto her Italian leather shoes in an elevator. Just perfect. She folded her arms. There's a wiring malfunction in one of the server rooms. Our systems flagged irregular activity this morning, and IT insists it's a physical issue. I expect it resolved quickly. Her tone wasn't rude. It was just, absolute. Final. Like she was stating facts that could not possibly be questioned. Yes, ma'am, I said, aware of how rough my voice sounded next to her polished tone. I'll take a look right away. Kelly tugged my sleeve. Daddy, can I help? Before I could respond, Eliza Austin's gaze dropped to Kelly. For a fraction of a second, her expression softened, barely noticeable, but enough for me to catch it. And you are, she asked. I'm Kelly, my daughter said proudly. Eliza nodded once, then looked away, as if reminding herself she wasn't supposed to interact with children. I went to work, trying my best not to make any noise or mess that might annoy the most powerful woman in the building. But while I was reconnecting the cables and checking the panel, I heard her talking to her assistants. She wasn't acting like the heartless CEO people often imagine. She sounded tired. Heavy. Like she'd been carrying something massive on her shoulders for years. Still, I kept my distance. When I finished, I approached her with my report. The wiring was overheated. Probably from overuse. I replaced the damaged section, so it should hold now. She didn't look relieved. Or happy. She just nodded and replied, good. That was it. No thank you. No small talk. She left the room without even glancing at me. And I swear, I was glad. People like her and people like me. We don't mix. Ever. But fate had other plans, and they started taking shape just a few days later. It was a Saturday morning, and I had promised Kelly pancakes. We were halfway through cooking, me flipping pancakes badly, her spilling batter everywhere, when someone buzzed our apartment door. My building isn't the kind where people visit. Which is why I froze. Kelly ran to the door before I could stop her. I wiped my hands and followed, expecting maybe a neighbor or a package. Instead, when she opened the door, I saw a black car parked outside. Standing next to it was a woman in sunglasses, talking to someone on her phone. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her immediately. And then she removed the sunglasses. My heart stopped. Eliza Austin was standing at my door. I literally couldn't process it. My brain shut down. CEOs do not show up at the apartments of maintenance workers. I think for a full 3 seconds I just stared like an idiot. Kelly, on the other hand, reacted like she had just seen Santa. It's the pretty lady from the elevator. Eliza blinked, surprised. For the first time since I'd seen her, she seemed unsure of what to say. And that alone shook me. Mr. Jones, she finally said, straightening her posture, I apologize for the intrusion. May I come in? My mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. Sure. She stepped inside, and that's when I noticed something alarming. She looked anxious. Not visibly panicked, but tense. Her shoulders rigid. Her jaw tight. Her eyes scanning the room like she was expecting danger. Is everything okay? I asked. She hesitated. No. She wasn't the type who admits things like that. I felt it instantly. Kelly, I said gently, go wash your hands and finish your drawing, all right? She giggled and ran off. Only when she was gone did Eliza speak again. I need your help, she said. And I can't involve anyone from the company. Not yet. I frowned. My help? I'm just a technician, she finished. Yes. But you're also discreet. And you don't look at me the way others do. I didn't know what she meant until much later. She handed me a small device, some sort of portable drive. "This appeared on my office desk yesterday," she said quietly. "No one saw who left it. Inside are files, personal files. About my family. About decisions I never made. About things that could ruin everything I've built." I stared at the drive. "What does this have to do with me?" "You repaired the wiring near the server room. You saw the irregularities before IT did. You understand the system better than most of my staff. I need someone who can look at this without being compromised." I didn't want to get involved. Every instinct screamed at me to say no. But then she looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time. Not like a CEO evaluating an employee. Not like a businesswoman analyzing a threat. More like a human being asking another for help. I swallowed hard. "All right. I'll see what I can do." She exhaled slowly, as if she'd been holding her breath. "Thank you," she said softly. And in that moment, I sensed something fragile beneath her armor. Something vulnerable she didn't allow anyone to see. I wish I could say things got simpler from that moment forward. They didn't. They got worse. Much worse. Later that night, after Kelly fell asleep, I plugged the device into my old laptop. What I found inside wasn't just files. It was a nightmare. Names. Documents. Emails. Conversations. All pointing to a decision made years ago, one that wasn't hers, but her father's. A decision that cost lives. A decision hidden by the company under Eliza's name. And then I found something that nearly made me close the laptop entirely. A record of an engineer who worked in the building years ago. A man who shared my last name. Jones. I clicked. My father's picture appeared on the screen. My stomach twisted. He had worked in the building. He had been involved in the project that went wrong. And there, in black and white, was a note claiming he had signed off on a safety inspection that later proved to be falsified. But my father, he would never have done that. Never. I sat there shaking, staring at the screen, feeling my world tilt. And while shock hit me like a punch, another thought surfaced, a cold, horrifying one. If Eliza saw this file too, she already knew. She knew who I was. She knew who my father was. And she still came to my door. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I met her again. She was waiting near the park where I usually took Kelly on Sundays. She looked different, less composed, almost tired. I handed her the device. "We need to talk." She nodded silently and followed me to a nearby bench. Kelly ran ahead to play in the grass while we sat under the shade of a tree that suddenly felt too small for the weight of our conversation. "I saw the files," I said quietly. She didn't flinch. "Then you understand why I needed someone I could trust." I stared at her. My father, he wasn't the man they painted him to be. "I know," she said softly. Those two words hit me harder than the documents had. "You know." Yes. I knew the moment I saw his name. I blinked. "Then why involve me?" "Because you deserved the truth before someone else used it against you. And because I didn't want to face it alone." Her voice cracked on the last word, so slightly that if I hadn't been looking at her, I would have missed it. Before I could respond, Kelly ran back to us holding a flower she had picked. "Miss Eliza, look. It's pretty like you." Eliza stared at the flower. Then at Kelly. Then back at the flower. Something in her expression melted, something I didn't think she was capable of showing. "It's beautiful," she murmured. Kelly placed the flower in Eliza's hand and hugged her without warning. Eliza froze at first, shocked, as if no one had touched her like that in years. Then, slowly, she rested a hand on Kelly's back. And I swear, in that moment, something shifted in all three of us. But even as warmth filled that quiet instant, a cold truth lingered. We were tangled in something dangerous. Something that could destroy her. And something that could tear apart the last pieces of my father's memory. I wasn't prepared for what came next. And neither was she. This was only the beginning. I didn't want to admit it, but something about the moment Kelly wrapped her arms around Eliza stayed with me for days. There was a softness in Eliza's eyes I hadn't seen before, something raw and unguarded. It didn't match the woman the world described, the cold CEO, the perfectionist, the untouchable. This was someone who looked like she'd forgotten what warmth even felt like. But despite that moment in the park, the reality around us wasn't gentle. Those files weren't something you could ignore. Not if you cared about your past. Not if she cared about her future. The next week was a blur. I went to work pretending nothing in my life had changed, but inside I was constantly replaying those documents in my mind. My father's face. His name. The forged signature. The lies. The accident that stole lives, including the life of someone Eliza once cared deeply about. The company pinned the blame on him and moved on. But I couldn't. I found myself fixing things obsessively at work, even things that weren't broken. I'd be halfway through tightening a pipe before realizing it didn't need tightening at all. My coworkers noticed, but no one said anything. Everyone just assumed I was tired. Being a single father apparently gives you unlimited passes for looking like you haven't slept in a decade. One night, after putting Kelly to bed, I sat on the couch staring at my phone. I had Eliza's number now, she insisted after I helped her with the files, but I hadn't called her once. I kept telling myself it wasn't because I was scared. But it was. I didn't want answers that could destroy the last good memories I had of my father. But then, at 11:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was her. "Are you awake?" I stared at the screen for a long second before typing back, "Yeah. Can you come to the building? I need to show you something." I hesitated, thinking of Kelly asleep in her room. I couldn't leave her alone. But before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. "You can bring Kelly. I'll have security waiting." I sighed, grabbed my jacket, scooped Kelly into my arms, and carried her to the car without waking her. 15 minutes later, I pulled into the Austin Court parking garage. Security actually escorted us straight to the private elevator. When the doors opened at the top floor, Eliza was standing there. Not in a suit. Not in heels. She was wearing jeans and a loose sweater, her hair softly undone. I had never seen her look anything less than perfect. Somehow, this softer version of her, hit me harder than any boardroom version ever could. "You brought her," she whispered, looking at the sleeping girl in my arms. "You asked." She nodded and motioned me inside her office. Not the one with the glass walls everyone saw. A second room behind it, private, untouched, almost homelike. She closed the door softly. "I didn't know if I should show you this," she said, walking to a small table where a laptop sat open. "But if I don't, someone else will." She pressed play. A video popped up, security footage from years ago. My chest tightened instantly. In the video, my father stood in a hallway speaking to a man in a suit. I didn't recognize the man, but his voice made my skin crawl. "You'll sign it," the man said. "Or I'll make sure you never work again." My father shook his head. "I'm not falsifying a safety report. It's a hazard. This structure isn't stable." "Then we'll find someone who will," the man snapped. "You're either with us or out." The video cut. My head spun. Eliza looked at me with a kind of sorrow I didn't know how to handle. "He refused to sign," she said quietly. "The signature, it was forged after the fact." I sank into the nearest chair. My throat burned. Then why did the company blame him? She ran a hand through her hair, pacing slowly. "Because the man who forged it was my father. I looked up sharply. She nodded, jaw tight. He was desperate to protect revenues and keep the board from cutting corners. He made a terrible decision. Multiple terrible decisions. And then he spent years hiding them. When he died, everything fell into my hands, including the consequences. The weight of what she carried hit me like a punch. She had been living inside a legacy of rot and secrets. A legacy she didn't create but was now expected to clean up. And why didn't you go public? I asked. She looked away. Because the board would destroy me. Because they'd release false narratives. Because they would drag your father through the mud again to protect themselves. And because I didn't know who to trust. Her eyes found mine. Until you. I didn't know what to say. I had no idea how two people from such different worlds ended up sitting in that room together at midnight, bound by tragedies neither of us chose. Bound by secrets far bigger than we were. Kelly stirred in my arms, and Eliza seemed to soften again. You can lay her on the couch, she said gently. I did. And when I turned back, she wasn't by the laptop anymore. She was standing close to me. Too close. Paul, she whispered, I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just stepped forward and wrapped my arms around her. She didn't resist. She melted. For a long moment, she rested her forehead on my chest. And in that quiet space, with only the sound of her breath and the faint hum of the building around us, I realized something terrifying. I cared about her. Not the CEO. Not the powerful woman. Not the name everyone feared. Her. Eliza. But people like me don't get to hold people like her. At least, that's what I told myself as the days passed. Our lives got tangled fast. We met at odd hours. We shared information, fears, plans. She told me things she had never told anyone. And every time we talked, every time she let me see the fragile parts of her, it became harder to pretend we were just dealing with corporate secrets. One evening, Kelly invited her to dinner, completely unprompted. Eliza showed up. She didn't know how to sit in a modest apartment. She didn't know how to hold a fork casually. She didn't know how to relax with spaghetti and paper napkins. But she tried. And Kelly adored her instantly. Watching them laugh together did something dangerous to me. Something I wasn't ready to examine. But while our little world grew warmer, the world outside grew colder. Because someone else knew what we knew. One night, as I locked up the building after my shift, a shadow stepped into view. A man I'd never seen before. Sharp suit. Scar along his jaw. The type of guy you immediately know is trouble. You're Paul Jones, he said flatly. I froze. Who's asking? He smirked. Someone who knows you've been sticking your nose in places you shouldn't. Someone who wants you to forget everything you think you learned. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. I'm not involved in anything. Good, he said, stepping closer. Stay that way. And then he added something that made my blood run cold. For your daughter's sake. I lunged forward, but he was gone before I could grab him. That night, I barely slept. I sat on the floor next to Kelly's bed, watching her breathe. Every sound outside made me jump. Every creak of the building felt like a threat. I didn't want to drag Eliza into it. But she was already in it. And the next morning, when she saw the look on my face, she insisted I tell her everything. She listened with her arms crossed tightly, her jaw clenched. When I finished, she turned away and breathed hard. This is worse than I thought, she murmured. If they're threatening you, they're desperate. Who are they? I asked. She looked at me, guilt in her eyes. The same board members who forced my father's decisions. The same people who covered up the accident. They're afraid of exposure. And if they think you and I are working together. We are, I said. She stopped. I didn't realize until then how much those words mattered to her. She sat beside me. Our knees touched. And that warmth, it was grounding. Real. Paul, she said softly, you and Kelly need protection. Stay at a hotel. Or stay at my place. My place. I repeated, stunned. Yes. It's secure. No one gets past the lobby without my approval. You'd both be safe there. The idea of living even temporarily in her world felt absurd. But after what happened, fear made the decision for me. We packed our bags that same night. Kelly thought it was an adventure. To her, Eliza's penthouse was a castle. She ran from room to room, amazed by everything, even the bathroom faucets. I tried not to look amazed myself, but I was. The view alone looked like something from a movie. Eliza gave Kelly her own guest room, complete with soft lights and a bed that practically swallowed her whole. Kelly hugged her without hesitation. You're the nicest fancy person ever, she declared. Eliza actually laughed. And something about that sound did something to my chest I couldn't explain. Later, after Kelly fell asleep, I found Eliza on the balcony, staring at the city lights. You're shaking, I said. It's cold, she replied automatically. It wasn't. Not really. I stepped closer. You're scared. She didn't deny it. They won't stop, she whispered. Not until the past is buried forever. Or until I'm gone. I reached for her hand. She let me hold it. You're not alone, I said. She exhaled shakily. Paul, if anything happens to you or Kelly because of me. It won't. You don't know that. I know I won't run. Her eyes glistened. Not with weakness. But with relief. With something she had been holding inside for years. She stepped closer, not slowly, not cautiously, like someone finally giving in to gravity. Her forehead rested against mine. And then she kissed me. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was soft. Careful. Like she'd been wanting to but didn't believe she deserved to. I felt her breath tremble against my lips, and I wrapped my arms around her because I couldn't not hold her. She wasn't the CEO then. She wasn't the woman from headlines. She was just Eliza. But moments like that never last long in lives like ours. 2 days later, everything came crashing down. An anonymous leak hit the news. A leak naming her. A leak pointing to my father again. A leak that twisted everything into a story that made both of us villains. Reporters flooded the building. The board demanded her resignation. And as if that wasn't enough, someone broke into my apartment while we were gone. They didn't steal anything. They just left a message. A single sheet of paper on the kitchen table. Stop. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a corporate mess. This was a war. And somehow, I had become a central piece. Eliza wanted to handle it alone. She wanted to protect us by pushing us out. She tried to send us away. But I refused. We started this together, I told her. We end it together. And so we did. I won't go into every detail of what happened next, the confrontation, the evidence we gathered, the ally we found within the board, the public statement she made, the truth finally breaking through the company's lies. It was messy and terrifying and exhausting. But we won. Not immediately. Not easily. But we won. The people behind the cover-up were removed. My father's name was cleared. Eliza kept her position, but on her terms. And when the dust finally settled, we found ourselves in the quiet again. Just the three of us. Me. Kelly. And Eliza. Sometimes I catch Eliza watching Kelly draw or laugh or dance around the living room, and I see this look in her eyes, a look like she finally found the thing she spent years pretending she didn't need. Family. And sometimes she looks at me with that same expression. And I realize fate didn't make a mistake when it threw us together. It knew exactly what it was doing. I still think about that rainy morning sometimes, the elevator, the puddle under my boots, the awkward silence we shared. I had no idea my entire life was about to flip upside down. If someone had told me that the cold, distant CEO would eventually become the woman I'd trust with my whole heart, I would have laughed. But life has a strange way of leading us exactly where we're meant to be. All I know is this: I didn't find Eliza. She didn't find me. We found each other at the exact moment we both needed saving.